Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video we're going to talk about Microsoft Forms versus Microsoft Power Apps. Now this is not the type of video to show that they are competing against each other, but it's more to tell you that depending on the scenario, you should kind of opt to use Microsoft Forms versus Power Apps. And I have a demo to demonstrate that to you to actually really understand how these scenarios work and what are the things that you want to pay attention to. So stick around, but first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. Now, as far as the scenarios where to use Microsoft Forms versus when to use Power Apps Canvas, let's talk about that at the beginning. And the big one is the ability to go ahead and use a form anonymously, even outside your tenant, where nobody needs to authenticate in or anything like that. You give them the link to a form and they can easily access it, and you are able to save that data somewhere in your tenant. That's the big reason for Microsoft Forms. Second big reason is it has the ability to be responsive right off from the get-go. You don't have to customly build a responsive form. Any form that you build with any design automatically goes ahead and gets responsive. And then the last set of videos that I've done about the quizzes, Microsoft Forms has that ability to build a quiz, and you can go take a look at those videos over there. Now, remember that this is all for a one-time entry where somebody comes in, fills out the form, and they're good. They do not have the flexibility that Power Apps Canvas app has to offer, where somebody went ahead and submitted a request, and then afterwards they can come back and see, hey, what is the status of my request? That is something Microsoft Forms cannot achieve. So keep that in mind, is that if I want a request for a one-time submission, and then after that I don't come back and review it, Microsoft Forms is the answer. But if you want a app type solution where I am going to go ahead and submit like a ticket request, and in that ticket request I'm going to go ahead and now review the status of it, any updates or comments were put in, all of that, then you want to switch and think about it and doing it in Power Apps Canvas app. So that's the big feature and the differences. And now what I'm going to show you is the ability of Microsoft Forms and how you can go and leverage it, because sometimes people haven't kind of misunderstood or think, oh, this is just too simple. And in this scenario, I'm actually going to show you that, hey, I have a Microsoft form, but if I were to go ahead and rebuild that in Power Apps Canvas app, how much work is involved? And importantly is how much of it can actually rebuild that in Power Apps Canvas app. And I've got this demo ready for you. So let's get started on that. You've actually seen this demo which I've built in Microsoft Forms. It was actually a session that I had done on Microsoft Forms sections. And it was a really neat one. So I've actually taken that same demo, but let me just walk you through that really fast. And I put the link to that video below over here. So if you want to take a look at it, go ahead and take a look at that, because it deep dives a little bit more. Over here, we're just going to do a review of those main features that Microsoft Forms has to offer. So right off the bat, it look like when I'm building it over here, I've got a theme design because it is a medical history form. So I've got a little theme going on over here. By the way, this theme was actually recommended by Microsoft Forms. So when I actually started putting in some the text over here, I started putting in some of the questions, it came up with some theme ideas for me. This was pretty sweet. I was really impressed with what Microsoft Forms had to offer over here. And next thing what I did was I broke this down into 3 separate sections. And the way the sections work is you can go ahead and start creating the section. You have to answer some questions in or put some question and answers. Then you can break it down into sections. So what I did was I went ahead and put in the sections of just the patient coming and just giving additional important general information. So that was the first section, is the name, address, city, state, all that important information, plus critical things that you might need from a medical standpoint, such as emergency contact information, ethnic group. And this is standard questions that are there from a very generic first-time patient medical form. After that, I've built it into a separate section. See, and that's why it's really important that how these sections are coming up. And when we demo it, you will see how that works. The separate section, and I can see I put a subtitle. This is all about existing medical information, and it works really well. I can go ahead and make it mandatory. I can go ahead and change it to, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy text because somebody might have a long list of allergies, long list of medications, and so on and so forth. And then finally, there is the third section. And the third section basically talks about all this other important information that you need to know about your past and so on and so forth, any alcohol consumption, recreational drugs, just standard questions again. So when we go ahead and now do a preview, you will see those 3 sections. But before we jump in over there, I wanted to talk a little bit about the rules which are there. This is a pretty important thing in Microsoft Forms. So let's actually go and take an example, all right? In the first section, these are all standard questions. So everybody goes ahead and has to fill out all of them. And what that means is that when you select on any one of them, all of this is required. In Microsoft Forms, to make something required, all you have to do is toggle that switch. And it's that simple, all right? Next is, and this is basically works for all of them, it's just that simple. Other one is the formatting functionality. Like I want to do a date of birth. For date of birth, I was able to go ahead and use the date format system. Again, built into it, and then afterwards I went ahead and made that as required as well. Very simple, very straightforward, but very powerful as well. All right, so now let's go ahead and change into a couple of other things. Next section was all about simple things, so that's good. Over here in the final section, we can actually start using the branching functionality. So what does the branching functionality do? It's right over here. Is I can go ahead and say add branching. What branching does is that depending on which one of the questions you've selected, branch out to another question. That's what branching means. And it gives you that flexibility to add some conditional rules where if certain question was asked, if certain question had this answer selected, based on that condition, go ahead and branch out to another question. And it's so powerful because for this question, for example, it is tobacco use status. If you are a current or a former user, if you select any one of those radio buttons, it'll immediately branch out to the 18th question. The 18th question is how many packs did you smoke in a day, or how many packs did someone in your household smoke in the day? But if it was never, then just go to the next question. Same thing on the next question, which is 17. Does anyone in your household use tobacco? If it is no, great. Go ahead and branch off straight to the question number 21, because other questions, which are the 18, 19, 20, don't apply to you anymore. So you kind of understand the whole branching functionality. It's a conditional-based topic, conditional-based option where you can go ahead and branch out straight to the next question. Built directly into Microsoft Forms without a single line of code. And about the branching, as you can see right here, it is a built-in system, a feature which tells you that, hey, now that you're adding branching, it is going to give you an estimate of how much the total time it will take to fill out this form. This is built into it. There's nothing that I had to do. The Forms is smart enough to say that, hey, this is a 3-page form. It has that many questions. The estimated time it will take is 10 minutes. This is directly a feature available inside Microsoft Forms. It's pretty slick, all right? This is, again, remember, a one-time filling out the form, no code solution, and directly responsive. And finally, it's the access permissions. What are the permissions tied to it? So when you come to the share, I click on share, and you've got 3 different permissions options. This is the anonymous access, like anyone can respond. This is the one that you can go ahead and click on it. It generates a link for you, and that link can be sent to anybody, even outside your company. People can use that. Perks, the downside of that is it doesn't recognize who filled out the form, so you won't get that information. But if this is going to be an internal company type of a scenario, then you can go and do this. Only allow people in my organization. You can even make it restrictive that only allow certain people in my organization. It's about permissions using security groups and people. So now you are able to see the full functionality of Microsoft Forms, but keep in mind that this is a one-time entry, and a general medical form is a perfect example. So now that I've given you a quick overview, let's go and test it, and let's intentionally try to make some mistakes and see how that form is able to capture that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to preview, and it's going to give me the flexibility of the form. And you see the responsive design I talked about, that right now we are seeing it from a computer standpoint because it recognized the browser. But if I go to mobile, it is able to do the mobile as well. In fact, if I send you the link to your phone, you can open it from your phone. The only downside I've seen is over here is that the nice background image that we added, that disappears. So it's something just to keep in mind. All right, so I'll go back over here to the computer view, and let's go and fill out this information. The information I'm going to put in is, full name is John Doe, and I'm going to say 123 Microsoft Way. All right, city I'm going to put in as Seattle. State I'll put that in as Washington. Zip code 12345, and phone number, put that in again 123 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to intentionally skip this one. I'll go ahead and put my birthday, skip the email address one. I'll go ahead and match something for the birthday. Yeah, pick something, and we've got that selected. Marital status, I'll go ahead and put that in. Contact information, something in again, and occupation. Let's try to skip a few ones here and there, and there you go. See this information which is granted. It's telling me that, hey, I'm on page 1. There's 3 pages, and it's giving me an approximation of how much I've completed, built inside Microsoft Forms. Now I'm going to go and click on next. Well, it immediately highlighted something. It said, hey, you've these ones which are highlighted red, they're highlighted across the entire frame over there. It says, hey, you've gone and missed that. Again, built-in functionality inside Microsoft Forms, and the reason for that is because we went and toggled that switch to making it required. In other cases, it also came and gave me this message. It said 3 questions need to be completed before going to the next page, and it even told me what those questions are. Question number 7, 11, and 12. So if I go ahead on the top, I missed that one. So let me go and put that in. This is john.doe@contoso.com. So took care of that one. Next, I'll go ahead and actually see while I was filling it up, it is dynamic. This reason warning is dynamic. It's telling me, hey, you only got 2 left. So over here now, if I on the one which I missed, which is question number 7, if I put that into say landscaping, I only 1 left, and I'll go ahead and put that in as Asian, and we are done. So I'll go ahead and say next, and here are the other ones. So I'm just again updating on the dynamically. Then now on page number 2, and I'll go ahead and submit that in. So I'll say seasonal allergies, medicational, off-the-counter allergy medication, health concerns to be addressed, seasonal allergies, seasonal allergies. All right, so now we're good. I'm going to go and click on next. This time I didn't mix anything, so we're good. Any of the recreational drugs, see, now we've got that branching conditional coming in. Let's try to pretend like I actually have tobacco use. So I said I'm a former user. But if I went and switched to next, it goes ahead and switches over. So like former, it gave me 17, then 18, 19, all these other ones, current ones. But if I did never, it would just jump straight to that. So see, the branching works really well. Former is how many packs do you smoke in the day? I'll say I smoked once. My quitting date was back in say 2009. It was a January on dates. I'll just go with that one there. Types of smokes. I said I would do a pipe. Alcohol. Nope. And then if it's no, and how many times did you drink? And basically the branching, I must have messed up a little bit. That's fine. Recreational drugs. Nope. And now I'm going to click on submit. Oh, how many times did you smoke? I forgot to do that. I'll say click on once, click on submit. So we've successfully gone ahead and now completed a Microsoft Forms. So now let's switch gears and look at how we can build the same type of forms that we saw with Microsoft Forms into a Power Apps Canvas app. And I selected SharePoint list as my backend. So let's quickly take a look at that list. I come over here and it's my SharePoint Online. And basically what I did was all the type of questions we saw in that Microsoft Forms, I was able to bring that in as columns in a SharePoint list. And I did pretty much summarize the column types into either a single line of text, multiple line of text, and date. Those are the 3 simple ones that I kept it as. And just a whole lot of columns, but the column types are very simple. So when I come back in my Power Apps, I made a connection to that data source with the SharePoint in that list, and this is what we have. Now, what I did was I went ahead and created 3 separate screens, because remember there were 3 separate sections in Microsoft Forms. The 4th one is just a thank you, which basically even Microsoft Forms had. So I'm trying to replicate that as one-on-one as possible. Now in Microsoft, in the Power Apps, what I did was I used the Forms functionality because it is simple, and the saving it is just one function, which is submit forms. That's why I kind of leaned towards Microsoft Forms. So let's spend a few minutes on seeing what is the customization that I did in the Microsoft Forms. So one of the things is when I added the form, if you use SharePoint list as your data source, and you probably already know this, once you've added it, it goes and populates the form with all your data source. So what I had to do was I had to come to the edit fields, and anything that I did not need, I had to click on these ellipses, which is more action, and remove it. Because I wanted to do a one-to-one match with the Microsoft form. And in the Microsoft Forms, in the first section, it stops at ethnic group. So that's why I stopped in the apps, Power Apps Canvas app, I stopped over here. The other thing I did was I toggled off the snap to columns. by default, it is toggled on, and I believe it had come with 3 initially. I went ahead and toggled it off. What I did was I went ahead and made it into number of columns as 1, and it filled it up nicely. And then I went ahead and toggled it off. So it just made it a little less work for me. You can leave it to the default 3 and toggle it off, but I just did it at 1 because it was able to already populate as much as I wanted, and then I can do some extra work. So once I did the snap to columns, I toggled it off. As you can see, I had the name title, left it as is, address title, nice and long, but the city, state, zip code, and phone numbers, those are all just smaller sizes. So this is when I was able to kind of shrink the width. And then once I shrink the width, I literally click on it, and then you grab it from the top. Don't click on any of these controls. You grab it from the top, and when you moved it up, it would actually give you that flexibility to do that. So that's what I did. And I went and left the email address the same way, did the toggling, moving up the date and birth and the marital status. All of these, I just did it that way, and it worked really well. Now came the additional part, because in Microsoft Forms, it did it out of the box. What I'm talking about is the sections. When in Microsoft Forms, I had created the sections, what it did was it was able to go ahead and automatically put in a logic that, hey, if you haven't selected any one of these, you can't even go to the next section. While in Power Apps, I had to think about how I'm going to do that. So there was 2 ideas that I had. First idea was, well, let me just go and put in a submit button over here, because if I go and submit it, that's when it'll go ahead and first tell me, hey, you have a couple of columns that are not finished or that populated, and they are required. So that could be an important one. But the downfall of that is that if somebody went ahead and started filling out the form, which in this case is an app, and they realize that, man, I made a mistake on that first page, I need to clear this form and come back. Well, then you've got to go ahead and put in an additional action to delete that first item that you put in. So the submit form right over here on the first screen was not very beneficial. So what I could do is I could actually first come up with an idea of putting in a button and then hide that button until and unless all of these features are filled. So let me show you that. What I did was, here is actually, it was an icon, it wasn't a button, it's an icon. And the icon is hidden based on certain conditions. So here is the icon. In the icon, I go all the way to the bottom and I click on this visible property. And when I go ahead and expand it, you will see that this is the property. Basically, this is the formula. Now, don't be alarmed by the size of it. It's actually pretty simple and straightforward. So let's go through that. What I've done is each of these data cards are actually controls inside the form. So let's take a look at that. The first one is the name title. The name title is right up on the top over here. But if you were to click on it, the ones that we are focusing on is the data card value right here. That's the one. So when I click on the icon, what I'm doing is that, hey, I'm basically just saying if the card value, the text in the card value is blank, and if all of them are blank, then don't show that toggle switch. Also, I'm putting it as an AND function over here. The condition is AND, not an OR. What that means is that if and until all of these are populated, only then you want to go ahead and show this visible. That's the logic over here. So that's why I use what makes sense to me is that I'm using a condition inside is blank, which means saying that, hey, if the title card value is blank, then go to the next one. But if it was, it's right on the top is that if it is blank equals false, that's what it means. If it's false, then go ahead, then don't go to the next screen, or then don't make the button visible. But the way my brain works is that not is blank equals true, because the true is what makes sense to me. That's why I've always been using as not is blank. And I've seen a lot of other people also come up with this idea, because the concept of showing true first and then saying that, hey, if this is true, then go ahead and make the visibility true. That logic just sits very well in my brain, at least, and therefore I've also seen other people do it as well. Therefore, instead of just doing a is blank, it is the not is blank. Basically, the two negatives make a positive, and that's my logic over here. So that's why all of them is for is blank and is blank and is blank and. The only thing we've done is for the selected, the date type column, which was the date of birth. For that, you use the is empty. Same thing, which was for selected items, like any of the ethnic group of yours that's just selected from a drop down. For that, you use is empty. So the whole concept is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind, it was the not is blank, and it just works. So therefore, in this case, once you have all of these populated, it goes ahead and then shows you the next button, which is an icon, and you go to the next screen. Now, keep in mind that while you are populated the screen or this section of the form, it stays populated just by clicking on the on select of this icon. And I'll go and show you what that on select is. On select simply navigates to the next screen. When you click on select, the form stays populated. All those fields stay populated. So that's screen number one. Screen number two, I have now done the exact same thing. I clicked on the form, and in the form, I just went ahead and first, by default, for SharePoint list, it populates all the columns. I deleted all the ones I do not need for this screen or in this in this screen. I only needed these three. Why? Because I wanted to match what we created in Microsoft Forms. And over here, the same concept again for that icon. In the icon that I had, just right there on the bottom right, I was able to drop down. I'm able to go to visible. And as you can see, in this case, it was just three of them. I had to go and make sure I had the data card values correct. And then remember, it was the not is blank equals true. And I used the and it moved forward. Same thing we're going in the screen number three. This is the final screen. So in the final screen, in its icon, which was actually, it was a button. In this case, there's a nice big button. And in the button, its visibility is the exact same way. That goes inside if condition. I go ahead and grab all of those controls that I have. Text ones, I mean, in fact, here there were a lot of drop downs. So a lot of drop downs were is empty. And for the text one was is blank. And it's the not is blank with the and, all right? So after I've done this, in its on select, I've actually come up with a pretty neat way. And in fact, this is not new. What I've done is I've gone ahead and submitted form number one. Form number one was on screen number one. And then after that, I went ahead and patched the remaining two forms. So as you can see, the first form goes ahead and saves the data to the SharePoint list, but only the data that you saw in screen number one. Second patch command will go ahead and first pick up that same item that you just last submitted. And keep in mind, the last submitted is the item that you last submitted. It's not that the last item that remains in the SharePoint list, because that could not be relevant to us. What the last submit means is the last submit that you just did. And we just last submitted the line above, which was a submit form. So the last submit function works very well for this scenario. And then after I've done the last submit, I can go and say, hey, update the information from form number two. Same thing over here for the next line. Go ahead and get the last submitted for form number one, and then update the information from form number three. So this is simple 4 lines of how to save data. In fact, it's just 3 lines. The form one, and then 2 patch commands. And then after that, I've gone ahead and moved over to screen number 4. Screen number 4 is your thank you screen. And in screen number 4, I've added a little bit of interesting material. I've gone ahead and used a timer. What the timer is, actually, I've hidden it. I'll go ahead and show you what that is. See right there, it's a timer. And I changed the default duration to 3000, which is 3 seconds. And I've also done is go ahead and auto start it, which means when you arrive to this screen, go ahead and automatically start that. And then once it has automatically completed on end, go ahead and navigate back to screen 1. So basically, I like the way I went. Since it's about Power Apps, I have the flexibility to do a little bit of manipulation. So all it does is it comes over here and then it populates it and then sends it back to the beginning. So let's test this one, all right? So now I can go back to my screen 1. We'll go ahead and do a save. And now I'll start populating some information in. And I'll say Daniel. Actually, let's go back to the same scenario. It's John Doe 123 Microsoft Way City. I'll put that as a Seattle state. Washington, zip code 12345, 123, 123, 1234. Actually, it's 4. Email address. Let's leave that blank for now. This one, I'll go ahead and put that in, just something. There, selected that. Marital status, married. Occupation, let's leave that, and I'll put that in. It's not allowing me to move forward at all because I've intentionally left some of these blank. So now if I go ahead and do that in as, fill in my email address, again, still nothing happens. Now, in order to make my Microsoft app over here as smart as Power Apps, I would have to put in some additional functionality. I'm talking about, if I did want to put a button, but the button would not allow me to go to the next screen until I've populated this, I actually have a trick for that. The trick is in your data source, make those columns required. So in my case, all the SharePoint list columns, I could make all of those as required. And over here, when I would go to the next form, I would actually go next screen, over there would actually make that mandatory, or actually gray, red light some of them, but we'll save that for another day. And right now I'm keeping it very simple, is that I've gone ahead and just make sure it is populated. And now that everything is populated, it comes up over here, because remember we use the not is blank equals true, and I'll click on this and now it takes me to the next one. So I'll put in some information on the allergies, is that I'll just say seasonal allergy, health concern, again seasonal allergy, off the counter medication. Now I'll do that. Let's go ahead and fill out some of this information. I'll say current. Now here I could do the exact same thing I did in the Microsoft Forms as well, is that based on this, what I select over here, the other things will go and get populated. I could do all of that magic over here as well. So that part comes along easily. All right, let me just go ahead and fill out all of this other information, quickly fill it up. I'll just randomly pick some dates and times. Pipe, alcohol, no, 0, recreational drugs, no, how many times, 0, right? So now that I've done all of this, I click on submit. Remember, in the submit, I go 1 submit and then 2 patch commands. Goes through, I see the ants marching on the top, comes back over here. It's a good thing I left that the clock over there as visible, so you could actually see that after 3 seconds, it came back over here. So we're back on the page number 1, and you see the data coming in, right? It was blank, but it came through over here. So it works really well. Keep in mind that we were able to recreate the form that we saw in Microsoft Forms, and we were able to go and recreate that in Power Apps. So we were quite successful, if I might add, to take that Microsoft Forms and rebuild that in Power Apps Canvas app. Now, this Microsoft Forms was pretty sophisticated because it had branching, it had sections. So for me to build that from scratch, it took me a good 2 hours to do that. But that Power Apps, I would say it took me like half a day, because I had to go ahead and build the SharePoint list, just make sure all the SharePoint list was there. Then I had to go ahead and build the Canvas app, make the connection. And then for each and every screen, I had to add the forms. And I basically walked you through it, so I'm not going to explain the whole thing. But there was that difference. Now, keep in mind that that app which I built, Power Apps, was not responsive. But that one is, the form Microsoft Forms is. So that's why I want to say that the example that I showed you was that the one-time filling out that form, Microsoft Forms was a great example. That medical form that we filled, Microsoft Forms is a great example. Power Apps in this case was not much needed. In the next video, I'm going to show how the two can actually collaborate. The Microsoft Forms and the Power Apps can collaborate with each other, where you do want to use Microsoft Forms as a front end, but you can use Power Apps as a back end, and the synergy is amazing. So definitely stick around to watch the next video, which I'll be releasing in a week or 2. So hopefully this was helpful. And as always, keep using Microsoft Forms and Power Apps. Thank you so much for watching my YouTube video. Remember, this is all free with fresh content that is updated on a weekly basis. So if you've already subscribed to my channel, thank you, and spread the word. If you haven't already, subscribe, click on the bell notification, and let the learning begin.